Good afternoon. It's Friday the 13th of March 2020, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me in the studio today, Patrick Henningsen from 21st Century Wire. Welcome to the programme, Patrick.
Great to be with you, Mike.
Well, I suppose we should get straight on with the latest statistics on COVID-19. 135,803 cases just before we came on air, 4,990 deaths. 70,427 recoveries so far. Now, just to add a little bit more to this, the active cases that are ongoing, 135,803, and of those, 54,627 are classed as mild, and 5,759 of them are classed as serious or critical. So that's the situation at the moment. So what has the reaction been to all this? Well, it gets more interesting by the day. We now have 7,000 soldiers out on the streets in Italy. Italy is now in complete shutdown. All schools, universities, museums, theatres, cinemas closed from Thursday. This is in a number of European countries. Austria, Slovenia, Poland, Czech Republic have effectively closed the borders. Poland, not quite. But they've set up health checks on the borders. In Poland, by the way, the church was encouraging people to gather so they could pray together. The government has put a stop to that, telling us straight away you can't do that, so that's been stopped. France also considering closing their borders, or at least Macron was suggesting that might be a possibility yesterday. Ireland has closed its schools, banned gatherings of more than 500 people. Of course, in the United States, Patrick, Donald Trump decided that he would ban travel to the US from the EU, but not from the United Kingdom.
Which seems a bit strange because it's just as easy to, if you're in Europe, to catch a flight, Mike, to London and fly from Heathrow or Gatwick or Birmingham or Manchester to the United States. You don't necessarily have to fly directly from the continent, and vice versa. It's air travel in both directions, isn't it? So it's a 30-day moratorium. Right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't. It seems to me that might be a political move, Mike. Some sort of wink and a nod, symbolic gesture between Washington and London, post-Brexit, perhaps, because logistically it makes no sense whatsoever to physically separate the United Kingdom from continental Europe.
Well, that headline there said chaos follows Trump's European travel ban. The airlines say they weren't warned. The EU say they weren't warned, and the FTSE 100, as a result, will continue its dive. Now, this was yesterday. You can see the effect that that's had over the last 6 months since coronavirus started filling the news headlines. Well, today there's been a little bit of a rebound. It's up 8 points, or at least it was up 8.7% just before we came on air. But nonetheless, the chaos reaching the financial system, absolutely. And I mean, we can't overstress the really unprecedented move that the Bank of England made on Monday that we covered on, on Wednesday, that we covered on Wednesday's programme, because that shift in interest rates was fairly large, and probably something that, well, no, definitely something they would not have done under any other circumstances. So coronavirus being used as perhaps an excuse for bringing in policies that otherwise wouldn't have taken place.
Well, there's no surprise really from the market reactions, Mike. The markets are going to react badly to unpredictability. If there's anything the markets don't like, it's unpredictability. They need some certainty, at least for a month going forward. So that's not a surprise there. But in terms of monetary policy, you're absolutely bang on the money regarding interest rates. Plus, you can see there's a lot of money being made available now in terms of loans, all sorts of different loans, business loans, personal loans. The government is also writing checks for social services, for paid leave, all sorts of contingencies, unemployment, layoffs, cutting payroll tax in America, cutting business rates in the UK, trying to give small to medium-sized businesses all sorts of little consolation prizes in terms of relief, because there is going to be an economic slowdown. There's going to be economic stagnation. It's happening now. It's going to continue to happen. The effects of this are going to be felt for not just months, but at least for a year, possibly more, depending on how long this economic stagnation period continues.
Well, we'll come back onto that in 1 second, but just before we do that, you've published a list of mass gatherings and events cancelled due to coronavirus, so sporting events,
music concerts,
yes,
festivals, some of the biggest festivals in the world, movie premieres, but also industry conferences, Mike, tech conferences, Silicon Valley conferences. So go look at that list at 21st Century Wire. It's very interesting. Just recently, Mike, the announcement of the Major League Baseball is suspending the beginning of its season in the U.S. The NBA, the National Basketball Association, suspending the rest of the season. A number of major soccer leagues as well have done the same, even in Europe. So this idea that mass gatherings are a public danger. So any gatherings more than 100 people, according to the French government, the Italians have similar measures in place. So this is where we're going right now. Again, the economic effects of this are
huge,
potentially huge.
Yeah, absolutely huge.
And not just that, the NCAA tournament, American College Basketball Tournament, was due to start already this week, and that is a massive income source for so many different universities in America through the television rights and so forth. They're not going to get that money this year, so that means there's going to be cutbacks with regards to university grants, possibly tuition rises. That's not going to help the student debt issue at all. So there's going to be a financial crunch at the university level. And by the way, Mike, I just got word. Someone sent me a list, an industry list for higher education in America last night. And there, as of last night, there were 225 major colleges and universities moving all of their teaching online. In other words, closing down campus. 225. That number will increase, no doubt, by the end of the week. So they're scrambling big university systems like the New York State University system, moving everything online as of this week. A number of other universities make contingencies to do that for a period of time and then revisit the situation at the end of April or May. But that's a major shift in terms of colleges and schools. So they're already moving their resources, Mike, into that direction.
Absolutely. And just to finish off with the sporting, it was announced just before we came on air that Premier League and EFL suspended until the 3rd of April at the earliest. That is a pretty big step and massive.
Look at the photo they chose there.
Yes.
So, I mean, what's the point, really? I mean, if they're closing down, they should be showing an empty stadium because that's the only thing you're going to see.
So the question is, with all this going on, what of Boris? Well, Boris, of course, made sorry, apologies for that. Boris made his statement yesterday. Well, really, what is he saying? If you've got a cough, stay indoors and don't go out. Boris is coming under the most unbelievable criticism right across the mainstream press. Daily Mail running point as usual on this. Basically, some people accusing Boris of killing British people as a result of not taking the appropriate action.
So he's not being hard enough on this crisis?
Absolutely, he is being absolutely vilified for it. And the same with Donald Trump in the United States.
Trump is being attacked in the media for not taking it seriously enough or not being firm enough. So these criticisms are expected, Mike.
Yeah, yes,
but in this particular instance, with a potential public health crisis, I don't think it's the right time to be playing politics, no matter how much you dislike whoever the politician is that's making the public health announcement.
But the politics is being played, and look, markets collapsing. This is going to have a serious economic effect. A really serious economic effect. If we look at the British economy at the moment, the proportion of people that are not classed as unemployed but are on extremely low wages as a result of being self-employed or being on the so-called gig economy.
The gig economy, yeah.
These people are the people that are going to suffer first. Now, you were talking earlier about, as we reported about the budget on Wednesday, there are contingencies have been announced for this. Is it enough? Absolutely not. It is not going to solve many of these people's problems. People are already losing salaries.
If people will fall behind on rent, they're going to have to be going to the government for assistance. in this. So really, what's this going to mean? It's going to mean that the state budgets, the national budgets, Mike, in a country like Britain or in a European country, they're going to have to increase the budget deficit, Mike. The money is not going to come from nowhere. This just means a lot more borrowing for the government.
Well, that is true. The government this British government has already announced it is going to borrow quite some more money on Wednesday, but it's still not going to filter down to individuals fast enough for them to not have an extremely hard time in the short term, possibly in the medium to long term as well.
Privy corporations might be the recipients of corporate welfare, I fear, as well.
Absolutely.
Selected corporations that are part of the national interest, let's say, they might be the first in line for some of those government assistance.
So if we
grants.
take into account what's being cancelled, sporting events, holidays, travel, local elections in some cases, Brexit negotiations have been cancelled for this week, and they're looking at, can they put those online? Can they have some kind of video conference for that? So all kinds of stuff being cancelled and being stopped.
In America, the Democratic National Convention might be cancelled.
Right.
This is set for July. So this is, again, the primaries themselves might be delayed or parts of them canceled. So it's actually affecting the electoral cycle as well.
So the question is, what are the implications of this action? Well, one of the implications of the action, Patrick, is that, as I give a quick preview to, we're getting a new lexicon.
That's right. So this is what we think you probably need to know. Some of you know all these terms already. Some of you are familiar with a few of them. So for the coronavirus, COVID-19, this is your new lexicon. The first term you need to learn is pandemic crisis event management. Everything that you see right now in the news, all the announcements made by politicians, your local authorities, this is pandemic crisis event management. This is followed by this term community spread. This is very important. You'll see this in many of the articles right now and releases that you're reading. Community spread. This is the virus spreading amongst the community, a small community or large community. So non-pharmaceutical intervention, NPI. What is this? This is a non-vaccination intervention by the state, by authorities, by institutions. And what's a good example of this? Well, the control of what they call social distancing. So shutting down of schools, closing of mass gatherings and public events. This is promoting the concept of social distancing. This is a non-pharmaceutical intervention. Know your lexicon, ladies and gentlemen, and self-isolation. This is what is being advocated for many people in terms of remote working or students not coming to campus, or if you are symptomatic, you will be expected to self-isolate if you fear that you might be coming down with the coronavirus. And there's voluntary and forced compliance. Obviously, the state is advocating for voluntary compliance on many of the measures and guidelines that they're putting forth. However, there might be a situation where forced compliance might be necessary.
Well, military in the streets in Italy is a good example of that.
Yeah, that's a good example. And some people believe that you're going to be seeing martial law in America. Of course, there are parts of the media, especially the alternative media, that are right out in front on that talking point, but it's yet to be seen if that's going to be the case. And here, this is important. In terms of social distancing, this is the ultimate of social distancing. This is cordon sanitaire, translated in English means hermetically sealed environments and quadrants. So cities, communities effectively on lockdown, neighborhoods on lockdown, hospitals, public buildings, etc., creating a cordon sanitaire. Look at all of these terms. You'll see them quite often in a lot of the reporting that you're looking at right now. And so just to follow on from this, we're also getting some guidelines here. This is a good example. This is from the Canadian Health Services. So aside from canceling an event, this is some of the suggestions they're giving in terms of risk mitigation, lowering the risk. So they're saying, now this is important, Mike, because going forward, even after this crisis subsides, we might very well see this as permanent health and safety culture. Okay, so this is why you need to pay attention now. Reducing the number of people or changing the venue to prevent crowding. So crowding is the danger here, according to various health services. Okay, staggering arrivals and departures. So the organization of your event needs to be staggered so that people are not arriving and leaving at the same time. I don't know if that's going to make a difference in terms of the contagion of a respiratory illness or virus like the coronavirus, but there you go. This is what they're saying, providing packaged refreshments instead of a buffet. Now, you might laugh at this, but if you look at how airlines are now treating travelers in terms of liquids, being able to drink or carry a receptacle with a drink in it past a certain barrier, they already have cordon sanitaires set up for security in places like airports. Okay, so we might be looking at this sort of kosher style refreshments where everything is absolutely sealed and packaged in advance, and that's all that's going to be permitted. Increased access to hand washing stations. If you've ever been on a cruise ship or this sort of excursion, you'll see that they already have this in place in terms of food poisoning. Also hospitals, you'll see this as well. Now, this could become the norm in all venues. It could be required by all businesses, by every single, every 20 meters, you're going to have a hand washing facility. Cinemas, everything. So anytime anything is handled or people are in contact with other people. This sounds frightening. That's because, yes, it is actually. The amount of regulations are potentially frightening here. Promoting protective practices. So hygiene, etiquette. There's a whole respiratory etiquette is a term that we're seeing now, believe it or not. And staying home if ill, that's kind of a social etiquette now. So again, this is going to cost businesses money in terms of leave. It's going to cost the state money in terms of paying for paid sick leave. So these are some of the things that we're looking at. And down here, offering of virtual or live stream activities, Mike. So it's good that the UK column is already in compliance with this regulation here from the Canadian Health Services. Changing the event programs to reduce high-risk activities. This is strange, but this is kind of more what we're going to see. What is a high-risk activity? How do you define a high-risk activity? That's the big question. What is a high-risk activity, Mike? Apparently, according to these new regulations that we're seeing rolling out from different governments, a high-risk activity is being in the same room with other people is going to be considered a high-risk activity, according to these guidelines.
So where does this leave us, Patrick? But you close a school, you send the children home. The children have to be looked after by their parents. The parents therefore can't go to work. This has a massive economic implication. It is a coincidence, is it not, that really the outcome of the policies around this are quite parallel to the kinds of policies that, the outcomes to the policies that people want to see for the global climate crisis. Less travel, no flying, not eating red meat, staying at home, these kinds of, working from home, these kinds of issues, reducing your carbon footprint, very similar outcome at the end of the day.
Watching Netflix, not going to the cinema. So again, big businesses create big carbon footprints. Travel creates big carbon footprints, so reducing your travel, all of these things, yes, they do very much coalesce with the pandemic narrative.
Absolutely. So here's another example of it, Patrick, because over the last few days, we've seen increasing rhetoric on social media. And remember, this is the Telegraph's Twitter account that we're looking at on screen at the moment. Can the me generation, who've never been denied anything in their privileged lives, be relied upon to self-isolate, or will they start whinging how stressy it all is when the authorities try to curtail their freedom to even a minor degree? So what we're starting to see from the mainstream press and across social media is pitting old people against young people. Mm-hmm. So, of course, the narrative has been so far that this illness mainly attacks old people, and the story is that young people are being extremely selfish by not changing their lifestyles to reduce the danger to the older people. So old people, young people being set against each other. This comes to some pretty wild extremes. This is a pretty disgusting article in Vice. Worst take of the week, young people are too selfish to prevent coronavirus. And they're really they're really saying that the story that young people are too selfish to prevent coronavirus is completely untrue. But the strength of the language being used in this article, I mean, Vice, what is Vice? It is a mainstream outlet, Pat.
Yeah, Vice is absolutely a mainstream outlet. It's designed to look like an alternative outlet, but it's not. It's absolutely a major corporate, big transnational corporate-backed media outlet, and it's designed to get through to a certain audience and a certain demographic. It pumps ideas and concepts and ideas of political identity, social division, social justice. It does work really hard in those areas.
Well, I'm not going to read out the piece of text that I'm showing on screen at the moment because the language is pretty strong. But you know, this is a very angry article. Again, at older people, but of course this also has parallels with what's going on with the climate crisis as well, because this is the message of Greta Thunberg that older people are destroying younger people's lives. They're just taking away their futures, and so in both cases we have this narrative being built, very strongly being built through the mainstream press and through campaigners. That there's a war coming between old people and young people, and I think this is a very dangerous direction to be heading in.
Sure, this is the culture wars. If you look at history and you look at the sort of culture wars that were kind of instigated during the rise of Pol Pot, for instance, the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia, or even sort of Mao's culture revolution, definitely there's different types of warfare, and young and old being one of the most divisive of all of the culture wars, more so than class warfare, more so even than ethnic sectarian warfare as well, between generations, extremely dangerous. And especially when you look at some of the other rhetoric that has been coming out over the years regarding things like eugenics and population control and all of these sort of narratives that tend to come into the stream, get fed into the stream here whenever they're talking about finite resources and how are we going to manage the planet in the future and so forth. So very dangerous.
So these parallels extremely coincidental, and we'll leave it at that for now. Now, if you like what the UK Column does and you would like to support us, then please head over to ukcolumn.org/community, and there are options to help us out there, and your help would be much appreciated and much needed. So Patrick, MH17 then, well, the trial has begun.
It has, and if you followed our coverage the previous week, this was from our press conference public meeting in London at Conway Hall, presenting evidence and forensic analysis regarding the MH17 air disaster. And here's myself, that's Akash Rosen, he's an audio expert from Malaysia speaking there, presenting his forensic audio report, and then also you have Max van der Werf there alongside Yana Yelishova, both from Bonanza Media. This is an independent media platform, international platform. And after this, we moved this was Conway Hall at Central London, very successful event, by the way, over 200 people attended. That might not be allowed to happen in the next couple of weeks because of the social distancing policies. So we're very lucky that we did it when we did. But this was ahead of the trial, and right before the trial, this is from our press conference in The Hague in the Netherlands, and we're there again with myself, Max, Jana, and also German independent journalist Billy Six as well. He is an investigative journalist who spent a lot of time on the ground in the Donbass, and everyone presenting new evidence and leaks which were featured, Mike, believe it or not, in the second day of the trial. The prosecution spent a lot of time addressing the information that we presented, believe it or not, in The Hague on Saturday. That was a bit surreal to watch that in the courts. But, and we moved on to the trial itself. This is again from the press conference here. This is from the Justice Facility, a special court set up at Schiphol Airport in the Netherlands, just outside of Amsterdam.
So this is not a normal court. This is for terrorism and immigration issues.
Yes, this is a secure court, as they call it, for immigration and counterterrorism. So this is where the trial is, obviously in absentia. We're here outside talking to various international media afterwards. I was fortunate enough to be inside the court in the public section, but could only see via video link. But the Dutch are very good with regards to translations. In fact, the whole transcript is available online. This is very different than the British proceedings that I attended regarding Julian Assange's extradition hearing, where you can't get any transcripts unless you're privy to that information.
Well, I haven't seen any video archives of it, but they are live streaming the event. Every hearing is being live streamed, so if you have the time to watch it live, you can watch it live.
That's right, they are. But when you go inside, this is what you'll see here. This is the inside of this very sanitized Dutch court. And the thrust of this story is very interesting, Mike, because you have 3 Russians and 1 Ukrainian defendants, and they're all being tried in absentia. They've been indicted and are being tried in absentia, except for one Russian who has legal representation. He's not physically in the court, but he is being represented by Dutch lawyers. Okay, so that means that they're going to challenge every piece of evidence that's being put forward by the prosecution. So this trial is meant to be wrapped up in, say, 12 months without any resistance. But now, if they're going to be looking at all of the evidence being presented by the prosecution, 36,000 pages that's how big the dossier is on the prosecution side, this might take up to 4 or 5 years now. And so there's a lot of strategy back and forth, plus the victims' families, next of kin, they want to see a speedy trial. They want access to certain documents that the prosecution has to look at. So this is very complex, this is very complicated. Plus, there's an ongoing investigation happening off to the side regarding the downing of MH17. So they've indicted these 4 defendants, they're putting them on trial, but they haven't finished the investigation. It's very problematic. And it's not clear that the prosecution actually have a really solid case. Certainly not for murder, because this is what they would likely be going for. But they don't really have a smoking gun, and they admit as much. So in a way, Mike, this is very much a political trial in much the same way that we saw with the U.S. extradition proceedings between Britain and the U.S. with Assange. Very much a political trial, but also with an international body that we saw with the OPCW as well. It was also based in the Netherlands. So again, very politicized. So with all of these high-profile international legal proceedings, it's incredibly politicized and very much dominated by the United States in the background. That's one thing that's common in all 3 of these situations. So there's huge stakes at play with MH17. This is a high-stakes game. We'll continue to follow it and continue to report on it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Well, Patrick, the UK has decided to send more aid to Idlib. They've delivered vital humanitarian aid, they say, to the Turkey-Syria border, which will provide much-needed relief and protection for Syrians amid the worsening humanitarian crisis in Idlib.
I'm sure it will.
Yes. So it was an RAF C-17 carrying 37 tons of UK aid landed in Hatay, Turkey yesterday afternoon, and the supplies on board included tents, life-saving shelter, hygiene kits, blankets, water purification tablets, cooking equipment and lanterns
and ammunition.
They don't mention that.
And small arms.
They don't mention that.
Right. I'm sure that wasn't on board.
I'm sure it wasn't, but Ben Wallace had this to say. Because he usually has stuff to say. The people of Idlib have suffered enormously during this conflict, and these crucial supplies delivered by our military will provide shelter for hundreds of families in desperate need. And of course, this is...
Hundreds of families?
Yes.
I thought there were 3 million people suffering in Idlib. How is that going to make a difference for hundreds of families?
300 families this is for.
Wow. That's a lot of resources to expend for just 300 families. Could they be key families by any chance?
Well, that's...
families of the fighters, possibly.
Quite possibly.
So that's an interesting question, isn't it?
It is a very interesting question, and it is a question that needs to be asked, but of course Ben Wallace isn't saying anything about that at this stage. Exactly who is on the receiving end of this aid, I think we want to know that. Absolutely. Now, Patrick, often when we say good news on this program, you say it dripping with sarcasm, but actually in this case it is good news.
Well, this was a shocking story. Some of you probably saw just 24 hours ago. This was Chelsea Manning hospitalized after an attempted suicide, said her legal team. So, and what's this about? This is about Julian Assange. Chelsea Manning was detained almost a year ago. And forced to give evidence to a grand jury against Julian Assange. Of course, Manning refused, Mike. And for that, Manning has been fined $1,000 per day for 256 days. That's $250,000 fine for not basically turning state's evidence against Julian Assange. So they need something Manning has to use against Assange to make the indictments against Assange that they're arguing in the British courts for the extradition proceedings about. So clearly the U.S. is struggling with its case. They needed Manning. Manning is not cooperating. Manning is hugely, I would say, committed and brave, committed to principle on this. He's not going to rat on Assange. Has already served her time. Her sentence was commuted, 35-year sentence by Barack Obama. Then ends up back in prison, being forced to create evidence for the Department of Justice. It's pretty shocking, right? Well, the good news comes after this, Mike, and the judge has ordered Chelsea Manning and Jeremy Hammond to be released. If you don't know who Jeremy Hammond is, he is also a person of great interest in the WikiLeaks case, and he's a hacker who is serving a 10-year sentence for the Stratfor leaks. Hack back in 2012, and he was a member of the hacking group called Anti-Sec, and he was actually due to be released, Mike Hammond, but because they did to Hammond what they did to Manning to try to force some evidence and testimony for the grand jury, Hammond lost his parole opportunity. He was doing a substance abuse program. He was due to be released by now, maybe in a couple of months, and he lost that through technicality with the prison services. So he's going back to finish his 10-year sentence. He'll probably be able to restart the process he had before, but it means he's going to be in prison an extra year because of the Department of Justice trying to basically twist his arm to testify and give evidence against Assange, as they've done with Manning. And you might look at all this and say, wow, what kind of a democracy is this in the United States that they're literally torturing people to give evidence, any testimony against somebody they don't want to testify against? Don't these people have rights? Isn't there a Fifth Amendment? How could the government get away with this? And $250,000 punitive fine for not cooperating with the prosecutors. I mean, it's unbelievable. What sort of banana republic is this? People might be asking right now. That's the United States of America. And where's the outrage? Where's the outrage from all of these social justice groups? Where's the outrage from all of the liberal activists and so forth? There's nothing. There's total silence. And this says a lot about the culture right now in the United States. It's been going on for a year, Mike. And everyone, of course, is following the Assange case because it's very high profile. But the person, Assange's source that started this whole story from the beginning, is being completely persecuted as a political prisoner. And if you think that's okay, they can do that to anybody, even a high-profile individual like Manning. That's pretty frightening.
And what do you think the future is for Chelsea Manning? Will they be left alone? Will these people be left alone, or are they going to be continued to be hounded by the U.S. authorities?
They could be hounded. I'll tell you why. And I've said this from the beginning. This is the last thing I'll say to wrap this up, Mike. That the reason they cut off Assange's internet when they did, I believe that was in 2018, in about April, because Assange was basically leading the conversation on the Skripal incident on social media and getting massive traction, pointing out all of the anomalies and mistakes with regards to the British authorities, how they're handling it, the information that didn't add up. So he's hugely influential as a thought leader, as a political activist, as a publisher, and so forth. Manning is equally potentially influential out on the speaking circuit. Okay, Assange, Manning, they need to be kept on ice as far as the U.S. authorities are concerned, and NATO and British and NATO member states are concerned, because these people are an absolute threat when they're out running around in public telling their story. And I think this is one of the reasons why they kept Manning on ice so long. And it didn't work. And now Manning's out and will probably need time to recover from this ordeal. But is it potentially an important voice? Or, you know, have they destroyed the person so completely in custody that they won't really want to take an active role, or were intimidated or bullied or tortured? Why? Through various practices that we all know are available to the correctional facility system. So, but yeah, these are important dissident voices, and keeping them incarcerated is a strategy, is keeping them out to be conversation leaders. People like this could turn the course potentially of elections if they get a platform and their issues get traction. So yeah, you have to look at this, that aspect of it for sure.
Absolutely. Okay, well, we will end with this then, and that is that 5G is completely safe. Now, last week we reported that Ofcom was saying that 5G is completely safe. Well, today the ICNIRP, which is the international body that regulates this stuff, they're in charge of setting limits on exposure to radiation. They have now said that 5G is completely safe, so we can all stop being concerned about it straight away, because this is a clear statement from them. They say that they are based in Germany, of course. They say that the health risks of radio broadcasts in their new guidelines, and they're particularly focusing on millimeter wave 5G. They're saying that it's safe because it's well below the new maximum. The actual transmissions that are going to be used are well below the new maximum. So let's look at what the chairman of this organization, Dr. Eric van Rongen, actually said. He said, we know parts of the community are concerned about the safety of 5G and hope the updated guidelines will put people at ease. He said well, it will come up in 1 second. The guidelines have been developed after a thorough review of all the relevant scientific literature, scientific workshops, and an extensive public consultation process. So we should all feel much safer as a result of that. Now, anybody that is campaigning on the 5G issue, as they've been highlighting for quite some time now, knows that there has been no thorough review of scientific literature, because there is no scientific literature on the safety of millimeter waves used by 5G technology. Of course, none of this millimeter wave equipment has been rolled out in the UK yet. Ofcom hasn't even decided exactly how that's going to be done. So this is all for the future. But in the meantime, despite there being no proper scientific investigation of the health risks, a statement like this is made, that a thorough review of all the relevant scientific literature has confirmed that this is safe for human use. So, Patrick, we have the precautionary principle being used over time on coronavirus, which is shutting down the global economy and is going to have a massive effect on us. But precautionary principle doesn't apply to 5G, because, of course, government policy is reliant on that network being developed over the next few years.
Well, you have to trust Dr. Eric, Mike. Look at him. I mean, how could you not trust a face like this? He's saying, we've had scientific workshops and extensive public...
Were you consulted?
Whether they've consulted each other, okay? They got together, they consulted each other over lattes, and they said it's perfectly safe. He oozes with confidence and good vibes, our Dr. Eric. So why would you want to question such a upstanding scientificist type of guy as that?
I think the name Dr. Eric van Rongen is perfect.
He's a
for
Rongen.
this.
Yes,
he's a Rongen.
He's a Pete Tongan.
Yes. Anyway, we will leave it there for today. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for joining us, Patrick. We'll be back at the same time, 1 p.m. as usual, on Monday. Have a great weekend and hope to see you then. Bye-bye.